Hello. Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can someone just respond? If you
Yeah, I can
okay,
hear you.
okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I think we'll start off so people might join in later. Yeah. So today I'll be dealing with module one, that is analyzing algorithms. So the way I've planned it in two sessions. So the first session, these are the topics that I'll be covering: algorithm specification, random access machine model, notion of best case, average case, and worst case, notion of algorithm correctness, asymptotic notations. So this basically covers 1.1 and 1.2 from the syllabus. Yeah. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me in case you have any questions or anything like that. Yeah, so I'll start off with it. So yeah, so first we all of us we know what is an algorithm. So basically it is a set of instructions to accomplish a task. So the next thing is what defines an algorithm. So as in the criteria or requirements. So these are the following requirements for it. One is input. So the algorithm would take zero or more quantities which is externally supplied as input, and it would produce at least one quantity. In some cases we don't have an output as such. The next thing is definiteness, as in so each every instruction that is written in the algorithm should be clear and unambiguous. The next thing is finiteness. So the algorithm should consist finite number of steps, and it should end after number of steps. The last one is effectiveness. So every instruction must be very basic. So this says that we cannot have complex instructions in your algorithm. So we should try and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, hi Arsha, this is
Yeah.
Parag.
Hi.
Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
between. Some people asking to you admit in this meeting. Can you please look into it?
Yeah. 1 second. I'll just look into it. Yeah. So here I'm not seeing any requests as such.
Okay, okay. Just based on WhatsApp inputs, I'm highlighting here.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so no problem.
Yeah. If ask, you can probably ask them to join using their Bits email account, so that they would not face this issue then.
Sure, sure. I will,
Okay.
I will put this.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'll get back to this. So the next thing is algorithm specification. So specification in the sense it's sort of like rules and regulations for algorithm, like how do you write an algorithm, things like that. So this is theoretical and most of us might already be aware. So this probably a little rush through it. So the first thing is comments begin with the double slash. So this is like a single line comment. The multi-line comment you can have it with the slash and the star. The next thing is blocks are indicated with the curly braces. So here what they say is compound statement can be represented as a block. Like if you see the criteria, the last one for an algorithm, it says that we should not have any compound statements as such. So we should break such compound statements and place it as a block. And the statements have to be delimited by semicolon. So this is not like a hard and fast rule. You can omit the semicolon as well. Yeah, so the next thing, identify begins with a letter. So these are the variables. So when we declare a variable or assign a variable, we don't have to specify the data type, and the scope as well is should be clear from the context of the algorithm. And then compound data types can be formed with records. So compound data types, as in say, in case you have like a student. So in an object-oriented programming language, what you would do is you would probably create a class with members in it, so that those data types can be formed with records. The next thing, so this is how the assignment of variable should be done. So variable name, then this symbol, and then the value or the expression here. And here we have two boolean values, true and false, which is produced by either the logical operators or the relational operators. So we have this and or not and these relational operators. So the next thing is the array accessing happens. So we'll have to use the square brackets wherever you are having array access. And array indices start at 0 unless it is explicitly specified that the index is starting at 1. By default, it is assumed that it starts at 0. So next thing is, how do we write a loop in an algorithm? So first we write while, the condition, then do, then you have a block here with a set of statements. So this is how you write a while loop. The next thing is for loop. So for loop, you have like an initial value and a final value, and then you have a step. So this step is optional. So if you don't give this step, it would be taken as +1. So it is as good as for I equal to 1 to n I plus plus. So, and then here again you have another block with a set of statements which will be executed. Yeah. So the next thing is, for loop can be implemented as a while loop as follows. So you have like an initial value and a final value, and you have this step count, and this is how you'd be using it to make a for loop. And the next one that you would know is the do while. So here in algorithm, instead of do while, we write it as repeat until. So we have a repeat, we have an until, you have a block here, and at the end you have the condition. Yeah. So next thing, the conditional statement. So if else, and switch case. So so this is pretty simple. So you have a condition and then statement. Same here again. You have a condition statement, else you have another statement. So in case of switch case, so when we write in an algorithm, this is how we write. So we write the word case, then we write a block, and here you have the condition one and the particular statement that has to be executed. So here you don't have like a break here. And then here, instead of the default, so here we have this else here. Yeah, and the next thing is your input and output are done using the instructions read and write. So in the algorithm, you just specify that read A or read B or write B C, something like that. So you don't specify what is the size of input exactly there. Yeah, and the next thing is, in case your algorithm has multiple functions, so you'll have to write each of them as like this. So you need to write an algorithm name, the method name, and you have a parameter list. So now I'll show you an example. So here are two algorithms. The first one is to find the max element of an array. So this is how we write. We algorithm max, and then we have the parameters. So here A is an array of size n. So here you can just see here it is explicitly specified as 1 to n. So the array indices is assumed to start at 1. So initially we go from the first element and we do these comparisons, and then at the end do the result. The next thing is selection sort. Again, this is a simple algorithm that is written. So here again, so here we have not given the step, so it is assumed that it is +1. The same thing as here as well. I think, yeah, that completes the algorithm specification. So the next thing we'd be seeing is a recursive function or a recursive algorithm. So the function that is defined in terms of itself is called like a recursive function or an algorithm. So here we have two types. One is direct recursive. So that is the algorithm call itself. So in the algorithm, you make a call to itself. The next one is indirect. So what happens is, this algorithm would call another algorithm, which in turn would call back this algorithm. So this is indirect recursive. So here I can just show you an example of a recursive. So this is a direct recursive. So most of you must be aware of this problem called tower of an ant. So you are ideally supposed to move these disks from one tower to another tower using another tower as the auxiliary. So here you can just see here this algorithm is being called in from itself. So this is a recursive algorithm. Yeah. So the next thing that we'll be seeing is the random access machine model. So the reason why we have this random access machine model is sort of like, this is a standard on how we measure the time complexity or the space complexity. So this is basically a certain set of assumptions that allow us to build on it. Yeah. So this is like an analytical approach on the pseudocode. So on the algorithm that you write, so you perform your calculations based on that. So in this, the first thing that you do is define a set of primitive operations. So here by primitive, it means that it is independent of any programming language that is used. So these are assigning a value to a variable, calling a method, performing an arithmetic operation, comparing two numbers, indexing an array, object referencing, and returning from a method. So here what we do is, instead of seeing the time that the algorithm takes, we identify what are the primitive operations and we check how many times the primitive operations is being called. So we make the calculations based on that. And the reason this is called primitive is because we assume that the CPU takes a finite number of steps for each of these operations. So here the number of primitive operations is sort of equal to the running time of algorithm. Yeah. So here I'll be going with an example. So this is the algorithm that we saw just a while before. So this is to find the maximum element of an array. So here you can just see here I'm doing an initialization. Here we have the for loop. Here we have the comparison, initialization, and then returning. So now I'll be telling you what are the steps that is here. So the first thing, so here you can just see result equal to a of 0. So a of 0 to access this element, so we take that as one step. So that is what here I've mentioned. And the next thing is you need to assign this value to this result. So that is one step. The next thing here for I equal to 1. So here again we have an initialization. So that is one time. And then you have we have this condition that we check I is less than n. So that condition happens n times. So here we have n steps.
Harsh, to interrupt.
Yeah.
Your voice is breaking.
Okay.
Your voice is breaking. Is it for only me or for all? Is it?
Can anyone else confirm that?
For me, for you. I don't. Yeah, fine for us.
You can probably try rejoining. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'll rejoin then.
Okay. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So here we can just see again where we index. So we are using this index. So to access this, so that is one step. Then we have this comparison. So this comparison is taken as one step. So now here we have two possibilities. One is this condition results in true or else it results in false. In case it comes true, so what we do is we access this element. So that is one step. Then we assign it to this result, the variable result. So that is another step. So even if this executes or not, so we have this is common. So we increment I, so that is one step, and assign it back to itself, that is another step. And this whole operations, this would take place n minus 1 times. Okay. And the last one is returning. So returning is again considered as one operation. So if you see the count, so here it is 2, here it is 1 plus n. Here, so here we have two things. That is because one, when we have this comparison as true, so then we have two extra operations here. So that is why it is 6 into n minus 1. Else it is just 4 into n minus 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last one is 1. So now we add up all of this to get the complexity. So here you can see it says at least. So this you're taking the best case. So you have 2, 1 plus n, 4 of n minus 1 and 1. So that you get it as 5n. So this happens when your first element is the max element. So what happens is you just come here. This comparison would happen only the first time. So the next time it would not happen. And hence the number of steps would be lesser. And the last one is, in case this condition evaluates true all the time. So that would happen when the elements are sorted in increasing order. So in that case, the number of steps would be higher. So that is given by this. Any doubts or anything like that?
Yeah, Harsha.
Yeah.
Can you please make this session more interactive? Because you're from section 1 only.
Section 5.
Okay. So guys, let me. Sorry, I joined late. The guys who joined from section 4 and section 5. So they might, for them, this session is a first session. But for section first and for Bangalore guys, we have been doing the sessions from last 1 week. So guys, this is more of an informal session. Feel free to, means it's not a professional or means it's not a office or something. Feel free to share your thoughts and whatever. And or for Harsha, if you could make this session more interactive, so that will be more,
Yes. The first part of the module is totally theoretical. So the next session would have mostly problems. So that is where I thought it will be a little interactive. So this I'll try to make it a little more interactive. Yeah, thank you for it.
Yeah, one more thing, Harsha. Some people joined late, maybe could you please brief the outline of this session so that will be beneficial for
Okay, yeah, I'll
to
just
understand?
summarize till now whatever we have done. So the first thing that we did was we understood what was an algorithm, and then the criteria that an algorithm should follow. And the next thing was algorithm specification. So specification as in what are the rules that you have to follow while writing an algorithm. Then we saw an example of an algorithm. After that, we came to this random access machine model, the reason why we use this, and what are the assumptions that we have in this model. Now, this what we are doing is using this model, we are computing the complexity of a particular algorithm.
Yeah. Hi, this is Prasad.
Yeah.
I just have a doubt, as
Yeah.
maybe this also can help. Okay. See, here we just have one if statement, so no issues. Maybe if we have if, else if, and else if. So how which we will take into consideration for finding the time complexity.
Yeah, we'll be considering all of it. So here, so here you can just see.
With the blocks or
Sorry. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Harsha, you are. I think Prashant dropped off or his connection.
Okay. To clarify Prashant's doubt, so in case we have an else, so that would also be counted. So here you can just see that this if condition would not be evaluated always, but still we are considering that as one of the possibilities. So in case we have an else, so we'll again consider that as well while computing this. Any other questions?
Hi, Harsha.
Yeah,
This is
hi.
Arun. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, sorry. So I was just want to know that like in the exams they will cover only the worst case scenario, right? The big O.
Yes, yeah. That will be the most asked thing.
Okay. Do you have any kind of like problems that you can share like with the different things, like
Yes.
how where the log had will come, where will you use?
Yes. Yeah, that is there.
Harsha.
Yeah, hello. Hi.
So in the for loop, I could say the initialization part, and then we have the comparison part also into that, but we don't have the increment part there, right?
Yeah.
For that, I mean, do you consider 1 plus n operation?
Yeah, we do consider. So here you can just see here, I've just mentioned that. So increment of I is considered as one operation, and assigning that value back to itself is one operation. So the reason I included it here is because these operations happen n minus 1 times. So I just wanted to group them together. So that is why I just had it here.
So together it's an n operation.
Sorry?
So together it is an n operation. Is that what you're saying?
No. The comparison happens n operation. So the last time, so when n is, you have the last time, so n is less than n. So that is why here you have n times. So n minus 1 times these operations would happen.
Okay.
Harsha?
Yeah, hi.
Actually, I have a question.
Yes.
So, RAM model, like, I didn't really understand. Sorry for that. Can you just say like why we have this and how
Guys,
do we?
please go on mute. Who is not speaking?
Okay, so yeah, to answer that question, the reason why we have the RAM model, so just take an algorithm, say you develop an algorithm and you run it in a machine. So it takes around 50 seconds. The same algorithm, you run it in someone else's machine, which has almost the same configuration, and it might take a little more or a little less. So that again depends on what are the other processes running. So we sort of don't have like a standard to measure the time. So that is the reason they have come up with this RAM model, in which what we do is we consider a set of primitive steps. So primitive steps as in the basic steps. So independent of any programming language that you use. So we use those operations to compute to not exactly, but an approximation of what would be the running time of the algorithm. Does that answer your question?
Okay. So, like, what question can we expect from this RAM model? Like, just to find the time complexity for
Yes,
our
yes, yeah.
algorithm.
So if you see the previous papers, most of it is they'll probably ask you some algorithm, say for example selection sort, like write an algorithm to sort the elements using selection sort, and they'll ask you to derive the complexity of the algorithm. So in that case, you'll have to follow the same steps and find it.
But like they are expecting us to write these algorithms, selection sort, insertion sort, all these, but they're not taught in the class. So, like, what is the expectation from us that
Yeah.
we?
So if you just see the papers, so I've not come across papers which says like right selection sort or something like that. So they have like a specific problem. So you will have to write your own algorithm. So you'll be doing it on spot, and then you'll have to identify the complexity. It can be the time or the space complexity, whatever it is. So it is not like a standard thing that you'll have to probably mug up and then write it.
Yes, yes, because that is what I was thinking. Do we
Yes,
have to
yes.
learn
No, no,
these
no, no. No.
algorithms?
You just have to like know how the selection sort works or bubble sort, how it works. So the questions would be like you'd probably apply that as a part of the answer. So it will be good if you know how exactly it works. So you can just write the code or the algorithm when they've asked.
So, Harsha, on this note, I just want you to like explain if what is the method that should be followed for studying this. Like currently till now, I was just hearing the recording, whatever was taught in the class. Like I just concentrated on that. But not, like if we have to go to like this Tower of Hanoi problem that you showed and
Yes, yes.
the coding techniques, so that is absolutely like unknown to me as of now.
Okay.
So, like, should I like go to these books and go through them? Like,
Yeah, we'll
what
be
is
solving a few problems like probably this session or probably the next session. So the next session is mostly full of problems. So I'll be taking various algorithms, and so once you get a little practice with that, you will probably be able to do it on your own. Given any algorithm, you can do it.
okay?
Asha,
Okay.
Yeah, hi.
one question.
Yes.
Asha, what about, so you have written the if statement. What about else statement? In the else statement, what will be the...
Yeah, so here in the else part, we don't have anything as such, right? So that is why here there are no operations considered for the else part. So in case you have the else part, so you'd have something like, or you'll have something else, some other number here. So in that case, you'll have three different things. So the one would be the best, one would be the worst, the other one would be the average case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if else is there, what will be the value? It will be n? Will be only one n? Or how it is?
Yeah, the else part. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So in case you have the else part, so that is again, so that would be taken in consideration when you this one evaluates to false. So here, when this evaluates to true, you consider 6 n minus 1. So in case you had this else part, right? Say the else part had two steps. So you put 2 plus 6 again. Yeah, you have 2 plus 4 into n minus 1. So you would consider that part along with the other calculations.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are other algorithms. So probably like when I go to that, you'll be a little more clear on that.
Okay.
So I'll move forward then, I guess. It's fine. Yeah.
Anybody record this session?
Yes, I'm recording it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll move to the next one. So the next thing is an analysis framework. So what is the framework on which the entire analysis is done? So first thing, we understood what was the RAM model. So now we'll understand how exactly we make the calculations. The first thing is time efficiency or the time complexity. So this would indicate how fast the algorithm runs given different size of inputs. The next thing is space efficiency. So space efficiency is the extra space that the algorithm requires to run to completion. So here, in case of this analysis, what are the steps? The first thing is identify the most important operation of the algorithm, which is called the basic operation. So it can be a comparison, it can be a multiplication, addition, anything like that. So you'll have to identify what is the most important operation of the algorithm, and then you'll have to see how many times this operation is being executed. So based on this, you'll be analyzing the complexity. So this part is actually not in syllabus, but this is to just have an understanding of when we are doing this time complexity and all of that, why are we considering only the input size and not other factors. So this is just an explanation for it. So let consider this COP as the execution time of the basic operation. So you have, say, multiplication, so it takes some amount of time, that is COP, and the number of times it is executed is C of n. So the total running time would be a product of these two, right? So here we have set of assumptions. So this count of n is count of just the basic operation. So we ignore all the other operations. And this COP is an approximation. So the reason we say an approximation is because, and here you can just see the reliability is not always easy to access. So this is because you cannot probably like run just your algorithm in your machine. So there are other processes which is running. So this is totally not reliable, the time as such. Yeah. So now, for instance, here I'm taking the count to be n into n minus 1 by 2. Okay, so if you simplify this, you get n squared by 2 minus n by 2. So if you consider these two, so this, when n becomes larger and larger, so this becomes almost negligible. So what we do is we just take this n squared by 2. Right. The next thing is, how do we know, like the algorithm say the input size is doubled, so how much time would it take? So here you can just see the time taken for the double size of the input divided by time taken for the single size of the input. So like here you have this formula C of into C of n. So we substitute here, C of, we cancel it out, and then you have C of n and C of 2n. So using this formula, you just substitute here, and at the end you just get 4. So what this suggests is that, so when your input is doubled, it takes 4 times more longer than what it took for the single size input. So from this we have a few observations. First thing is, this time that is taken for the basic operation, that was cancelled in the ratio, so this is not needed. The next thing is, we have this multiplicative constant that we got from here, so that was cancelled out as well. So this is the reason why we ignore this time and these multiplicative constants while doing this analysis. So we just focus on the input size. Yeah, I hope that was clear. Do anyone have any doubts regarding this?
I think
This is not in syllabus.
Yeah.
This is not in syllabus. You're saying?
Yes, this is not in syllabus. This is just for your understanding. That's it. Okay, then if there are no questions, I'll just move forward.
Yeah, I think for
Yeah.
Raj,
Yeah.
Asha, sorry.
Yes.
How the C of is 1 by 2?
Sorry, which one? This one. No, COP is not 1 by 2. So COP gets cancelled here since it's the same value. So this 1 by 2 is C of 2n. So you have this n square by 2, right? So 1 by 2 into n square. So n is here is 2n. Again, here you have this n square.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I'll go ahead. So here we have 3 things. So one is the best case efficiency. So best case efficiency is when your algorithm runs the fastest. So that would be for an input of size n. So say you have this algorithm to find this maximum element. So you can have an array of size say 10, and your algorithm can perform differently based on how your numbers are arranged. So if it is in the first position, then it is got immediately. So that is considered as the best case. Worst case, so this is the efficiency for which the algorithm runs the longest. Say in case where you have your element to be searched in the last, so we'll have to do n comparisons to reach there. So that is sort of like the worst case. And the next one that you have is the average case efficiency. So this is like a typical behavior. So say your search element is somewhere in the between, or in the first half or the second half, something like that. So these are the three efficiency that we take into consideration. Yeah, so here I'm taking the sequential search, the example here, and we'll be analyzing what are the three efficiencies for this. So here you can just initially, I'm just initializing it to 0, and while I is less than the size of the array and it is not equal to the search element, just increment your I. So at the end, in case your element was found, this increment would stop, the loop would stop, and this you would return the current index of it. Else you just return -1. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt in between. Sequential search means linear search.
Yes, yeah, linear search, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is basically you find the index of your search key in your array.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So here the best case, so the search element is in the first place. So the first element itself is your search element. So that is the best case efficiency for it. The next thing is worst case. So worst case is either the element is not there in the array itself, or the element is in the last position. So in that case, we make n comparisons. So you can tell that the worst efficiency, the time complexity is n. And the last one, the average case. So here I've not included the derivation for this. Probably if you want, I can just send images of these derivations to you. So this is the equation for an average case. So here P is the probability of a successful search. So in case you have an element in your array, so what is the average time complexity? So in the case you have the element in an array, the probability of finding it would be 1. So what you do is you substitute it, this second term becomes 0, and you get n plus 1 by 2. So what it suggests is that on an average about half of the elements would be compared until you reach it. And in the case where you don't have the element at all in your array, so here we already know that it is n. So here if you just substitute the value of p as 0, you will get the same answer. So here it says the algorithm will inspect all the elements before completing it. Do you have any questions, anyone?
Average case. Can you please explain one more time?
Okay, yeah. So average case, so the derivation I've not included here. So this is the final expression for it. So P is the probability of finding the element. N here is your size of the array. And so here basically, so here you are adding both the probabilities of either finding it or not finding it. So in case you are finding it, so what happens is in that case the second term evaluates to 0 and you are left out with n plus 1 by 2. So that says that on an average you will be comparing, your algorithm will be comparing about half of the elements of the array. And in case when the element itself is not present in an array, so it is obvious that the algorithm will go until the last element. So that is what here it suggests. So if you substitute the value p equal to 0, this term evaluates to 0, and here you get just n. So this is what this expression tells you.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so the next thing is amortized efficiency. So this we usually don't calculate, but this is one of the efficiency that is there. So this is in cases where say the first run of
Sorry to stop.
yeah.
So what will be the worst case efficiency for the linear search? It's a n search?
Yes,
Is it
yes.
n?
It is n, yeah, because there are n comparisons which is made. So that is the worst case. So it would be n.
Okay. So in case of best search, what will be my representation? It's just because it is going to be only one search, right?
Yes,
so
yes, yeah.
then C of best is equal to 1?
Yes, C of best is equal to 1, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So coming back to this amortized efficiency, so this I can just probably give an example. It is not an exact example, but sort of something similar. Say the time required to access an array. Okay, so the time required to access the first element of the array would be the highest. Say it takes 5 seconds. The next elements would be next to it, so it would probably take 1 second, 1 second each. So here, if you follow the actual thing that say for the first element it's taking 5 seconds, so for 10 elements it would take 10 into 5. So that would be wrong. So in those kind of algorithms in which you have this entire sequence would give a better performance. So there you follow this amortized efficiency. So this is, you just have to know that, okay, this is one of the efficiencies that is there. We don't have any problems or calculations with respect to this one.
Can you provide some real-time example or some example?
Oh yeah, this was the only example that I could think of, like the array access time. So you'll have first you have to find the first element of the array, so that would take some time because after that it is all contiguous memory, right? So it would be easier to access the next elements, something of that sort. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll probably get back to you.
For first element, he has to the computer has to search in a whole RAM.
Yes,
That
yes,
is
yes, 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 yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'll go forward to the next thing. So next thing, we have the three different notations that we have. So first is the big O notation. So you don't have to look at this definition for now. So what it suggests is, say this f of n is the complexity of your algorithm. Okay, so you have another function, say g of n, whose multiple would cover this region. So if you shade this region, so you can see that this function is covering the region of your function as well. So say in case you have your complexity is n for this, so your n square would be, so you can say it can be at the max, it can go up to n square. So basically means that it is sort of covering the complexity of your algorithm as well. So the way you can remember this is like big O, in the sense you can remember, since it's big, so it should be a little above from what your algorithm is. And the next one, omega. So omega is just the opposite. So you have your complexity here, and there is another function whose complexity is less than that. So here you can just see this is called your function for which you can say that f of n belongs to omega of g of n. Yeah, so big O is above, omega is below, and the last one, theta. So theta, what you have is, you have sort of like a family of curves. So you have g of n, you have two different constants that they are multiplying. So the value of your complexity of your algorithm would oscillate only between these values. So it will never go above this or below this. So that is the theta notation. So you can remember, so big as in above, omega as in below, theta as in between.
So big O means the worst condition.
Yes, yes, yeah. Big O as in, so yeah, you can just see here. So what is the maximum, the worst thing that the time it would take, and this omega is the best. So minimum, what is the time complex that it can take, and the theta is sort of gives like the average complexity, the average efficiency of your algorithm. Yeah. Can I go to the next thing? I think, yeah. So your complexity is always given in terms of these pre-known functions. So this is given in increasing order of the growth rate. As in, so this, if your algorithm has complexity of log n, so it is better than an algorithm of complexity, say square root of n. So this is how the order increases. So first you have this constant, then you have logarithmic, then you have a power to this, then n power 1 by 2 minus 1 by 2, then n log n, the n square, n cube, 2 power n, and the last one is factorial. So if your algorithm is of the factorial complexity, then it is the worst thing that, yeah, you should probably try to reduce it to, you should probably bring it to any other of these. Yes, I think with this, yeah, we are completed with the theoretical aspects of the first module. If we want, we can just take up probably one problem and then wind up with this. Or do you guys want to start off with problems the next session?
We can continue.
Okay, yeah,
We can do one problem.
1 minute.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please review the slide one time? As a quick revision of 5 minutes, whatever you have taught today, and then you can wind up with one question.
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. One second. Yeah, so the first thing that we saw is what was an algorithm and the criteria that an algorithm has to meet. So these are the things. So it has to have an input, it has to have at least one output, it should be definite, it should be finite, and each instruction must be basic. The next thing is algorithm specification. So these are the rules. So you have comments beginning with this double slash, you have blocks which is enclosed between curly braces. So the variables, the data types need not be specifically mentioned, and the scope should be clear from the context. And this is how we initialize a variable. We have two Boolean values, true and false, both of which are obtained by either of these. And then accessing an array happens using this square brackets, and the indices are start with 0 unless explicitly mentioned that it starts with 1. So this is how we write a while loop. So while you have a condition, then you have a block for value 1 to value 2, and probably the step. So step is the increment, and you have a block. The next thing is how do you implement a for loop using a while loop. So this is again basics. The next thing is do while loop. So in algorithm we write it as repeat until. So you have repeat until condition, then in between you have a block. So here we have if else, and the case statement. So here you have if condition, then statement, else you have another statement, and in case of case you have different conditions and statements for each of them, and the default case is given as else here. The next thing is input and output is given using this read and write instructions. And algorithm, this is how we'll have to write an algorithm, the name and the parameter list. So this is an example of algorithm. So this one, so here you can just see here how we write it. Yeah, so the next thing is the recursive function. So recursive function, we have two types, one is direct, one is indirect. Direct as in it calls itself, indirect as in it calls itself via another function. So Tower of Hanoi, this is an example of a direct recursive. The next thing is random access machine model. So in this model, we have a set of primitive operations that we define, and we identify the complexity based on the number of primitive operations that the algorithm has and the number of times it's executed. So we saw an example of how to calculate it using this RAM model. And then we came back to this framework. So what are the things that we have? So we have time complexity, space complexity, and the steps for analyzing, that is we identify the basic operations and the number of times it is executed. So the next thing is the efficiency. So best case efficiency is when your algorithm runs the fastest. Worst case is your algorithm runs the slowest. And the average case is a typical behavior or for a random input. And then here we saw the best case, worst case, and the average case for sequential search or linear search. And then we saw what was amortized efficiency. So this is where we have an entire sequence of operations, and then we calculate the complexity. And then we came back to these three notations that we have. Big O notation. So Big O notation gives you the worst case complexity. Omega gives you the best case complexity, and the theta notation gives you the intermediate or the average complexity. And then we saw the growth rate increasing order. So yeah, so with this yeah, we have completed this end of session 1. So I think we'll start off with problems now if you're ready for that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Harsha, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yeah.
So you made a comment that big O notation is the worst case scenario, right?
Yes.
Is that something that you can confirm again in the next class? Because something I heard that it's we shouldn't consider that as a kind of that relationship. Because sometimes even big O, it's more of an upper bound, and it
Yes,
could be
yes.
a best case, average, or worst case scenario too.
Yes, yes. So, yeah, I can take an example of that. Say, for instance, your algorithm is n cubical. Okay, so your big O can be any of these 2 power n or n factorial. So the big O should always be close to this value. So for in case your complexity is close to this, your big O should be this, something like that. So something a little above your complexity. I can just confirm that once more. Yeah, can do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'll go to the next thing. So analysis of recursive algorithms. So in recursive algorithms, what we do is first we see a parameter which indicates the input size, then identify the basic operations and check if the basic operations, the number of times it executes depends on the input. As in say, so here we saw in case of sequential search, it would depend on the position of the element. So if it was in the first, it is different. If it was in the last, it is different. So if you have such case, then you'll have to compute these 3 different cases separately. And then you'll have to set up a recurrence relation. Since it's a recursive algorithm, you'll have to set up a relation like this. And based on that, you'll have to solve the recurrence relation to find the growth rate of your algorithm. Okay. Yeah. So here, this is one algorithm. So this computes factorial of a number recursively. So here you can see this is your base condition. So every recursive algorithm should have one base condition, and then you have your recursive thing. So here when n is 0, you return 1. Else what you do is you call this function for n minus 1 into the current value. So here you can just see the most basic operation here is this multiplication that you're doing. So this would be the maximum, the basic operation. So here you can see here it says the number of multiplication must satisfy the equality. So the reason why we say this is because, so here say we have n minus 1 multiplications, and at the end we have this multiplication. So once we get the value, we have this multiplication. So that is why we have m of n minus 1 plus 1. Okay, so yeah, in case of recursive algorithm, like we have a base condition, we always also have like an initial condition. So m of 0. So in case your value was 0, so what was the number of multiplications that was done? So here there was no multiplications done, so m of 0 is 0. Right. So now we take this. Yeah.
Can you please tell n is equal to 0 is a base condition, or return fn minus 1 into n is a base condition?
No, n equal to 0. This is the base condition. Base condition. Yes, yes.
So here you are taking mn is equal to mn minus 1 plus 1. So mn minus 1 is the function of this fn minus 1.
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, and plus 1 is the return of 1.
Yeah, the last multiplication that would be done.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
And this plus 1 means the return 1.
No, you return and then see, say, for instance, f of 2. Okay. So f of 2 would call again f of 1 and f of 0. F of 0 would return. Then you have f of 1. And then when you come f of 1 into 2, so this is the last multiplication that would be done. So that is why we have this plus 1 here.
F2 equal to F1 call F1 equal to F0 n equal to 1 and n equal to 0. Return 1. Okay, last call will return 1. Then that is why you have added +1.
You have +1. Yeah, you have one operation, like one multiplication in the last. So that is why you have this. Other multiplications are taken care of in this f of n minus 1.
Okay.
Yeah. So we take this relation, and what we do is we do backward substitution. So backward substitution as in we calculate for the next value. So now here the value of n is n. So next we calculate it for n minus 1. So when we do n minus 1, so we have n minus 1 minus 1. So that becomes n minus 2 plus 1 you have, and at the end you have this plus 1. So if you open this bracket, so at the end you get m of n minus 2 plus 2. And the same thing now, if you take the value of n as n minus 1 again, so if you substitute the value of n minus 1, so here again you get it as n minus 1 minus 2 plus 1 and plus this 2 that you already have here. So if you expand that, so you get it m of n minus 3 plus 3. So if you see this, you kind of like see a pattern. So you can just say that m of n for some value of I, so it would be m of n minus I plus I. Okay. Now to calculate what is the complexity, so what we'll have to do is we'll have to look into this initial condition. So we know that m of 0 is equal to 0. So we'll have to somehow make this 0. So what if we have to make this 0, what we'll have to do is we'll have to substitute I is equal to n. So when we substitute I is equal to n, so this becomes m of n minus n plus substituting the value of n. So here we have m of 0 plus n. So since m of 0 is 0, we are left out with n. So here you can just say it as theta of n or big O of n. So your complexity for this algorithm would be big O of n or theta of n. Yeah. Any questions, or I'll go forward to the next one.
We can move forward.
Okay, yeah. So here comes the Tower of Hanoi. So this is the algorithm. So here you can just see, here you have, these are the parameters. So n is the number of disks that you have. So x, y, and z are the 3 different towers that you have. Yeah. So first what you do is, so your algorithm, what it has to do is it has to move these n disks from tower x to tower y using z as an auxiliary. So this is just like a support. So when n is greater than 1, so what you do in that case is you call it recursively. So what you do is you remove n minus 1 disks from the first tower to the last tower. So from x to z using y as the auxiliary, and then you write this output. So this you specify the output, move disk from tower x to tower y. After that, what you do is you again call this towers of Hanoi, this the same algorithm to move. See, now here we have moved from x to z. Now we'll have to move from z to y using x as auxiliary. So once this is done, all the disks would be on the tower y. Yeah, so this I've explained the same thing. So recursively move n minus 1 disk from tower 1 to tower 2. So you remove all the disks except the last one. Then move the largest disk from tower 1 to tower 3. Once that is done, move the other disk from tower 2 to tower 3. Okay, so
Harsha,
yeah.
just a basic question. What
Yes.
is this Tower of Hanoi?
Okay, the Tower of Hanoi. I think you might have seen this. There are 3. Okay, one second. Let me just show that. Yeah, hope you can see my screen. Yeah, so this is basically what exactly is the Tower of Hanoi. So you have three towers and you have discs like this. So the number of discs varies. So the thing is that you cannot place larger disk over a smaller disk. Okay, and you'll have to transfer the same disks in the same position to another tower. So here, for example, for a three disk tower, so this is how it would be done. Yeah, so like you can see in the algorithm, it said move n minus 1 disks from tower 1 to tower 2. So once this is done, what we do is we move this largest disk to the last one. And then what we do is we remove the n minus 1 disks and move it to the last tower. Yeah, so this could be done in various number of moves. So the goal is to do it in the minimum number of moves. So this is what the Tower of Hanoi is.
Harsha, one thing I have to ask, the Tower of Hanoi is this is a process you have shown, but in real life, where we use it, just like a stack, we have seen the stack in real life. We are using it also. A queue we are using, but where we are using this Tower of Hanoi in the real world? If you have any example.
No, I'm not sure of this Tower of Hanoi, like where exactly it is used.
Okay.
Just 1 minute.
Harsha, I think Tower of Hanoi problem is actually applied in warehousing.
Okay.
When you want to stack a rack into another rack in a particular order, this is roughly what you apply to follow the sequence.
Okay.
Just a practical scenario I'm linking it to.
Yeah. Thank you for that example. Okay, so so the way we come with this recurrence relation is basically from this algorithm. So here you can just see, so here the basic step is moving the disks. So that is why I've just denoted it by m. Okay, so first what you do is you move n minus 1 disks from the tower 1 to tower 2, right? So from one tower to another tower. So that would be done n minus 1 moves. And then what you do is you move the largest disk from one tower to other tower. So that is this plus 1. And after that, you recursively move the other disks from the tower 2 to tower 3. So that is why we have this m of n minus 1 plus 1, and again you have this m of n minus 1. So here we say here the initial condition m of 1 is 1. So in case you have just one disk, so you just have to make one move. So that is what is this initial condition. So now this recurrence relation, here we have m of n is 2 of m of n minus 1 plus 1. So now we'll have to find the complexity using this recurrence relation.
Asham,
Yeah.
plus 1 is like you're moving from?
You're moving from, so yeah, the end.
Plus 1.
Yes, moving from one tower to other tower. At the end, you'll be remaining with just one disk after moving n minus 1. So totally you have n disks, right? So here you're moving n minus 1 disk. So this is to move that one disk that is remaining.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so here again we use backward substitution. Probably this would be okay. I can try to solve it. I hope you can see this thing. So I'll try to solve it using this. Yeah. So we have m of n that is equal to 2 of m of n minus 1 plus 1. So here what we'll have to do is we'll have to use backward substitution. So the way we do that is we substitute n equal to n minus 1. So for that we write 2 into, I'm just writing this, I'm just substituting m of n minus 1. So that would again be 2 of m of n minus 1 minus 1, and outside you'll have plus 1. Outside this bracket you'll have another plus 1. Okay, so this would be 2 of n minus 2 plus 1. This would be inside the bracket and plus 1 outside. So if you simplify this, you'll have 2 square m of n minus 2 plus 2 plus 1. So I think this is clear now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so now I'll go with the next step using this one. Okay, let me just clear this. So now we have 2 square m of n minus 2 plus 2 plus 1. So this was what we had. Now I'll again substitute the value. So now I'll have 2 square into 2 of m n minus 1 minus 2, that is remaining, that is inside, that you have there. Then again you will have a plus 1. Outside this, whatever you have this 2 plus 1, you just write it as it is. So here if you simplify, you can find it as 2 cube m of n minus 3 plus, so 1 into 2 square. So you'll have 2 square plus 2 plus 1. Okay, so from this you can just actually see there is a pattern. So if you just see, the pattern is 2 power I m of n minus I, and here you can see the powers of 2 that we are adding is 1 less than what we have. So that would be 2 power of I minus 1 plus 2 power of I minus 2, so on until 2, and then you have a plus 1. So I think this is clear till here, right? I'll just erase it after this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah. So now we have 2 power I m of n minus I, and so here I showed you that we had I minus 1, I minus 2, so on, you have it, plus 2, and you had this plus 1. So I'm just writing this plus 1 away. So here what I'll be doing is I'll be adding plus 2, I'll be minusing 2, adding and minusing 2. So here if you just see this whole thing that we have here, 2 power I minus 1 plus 2 power I minus 2, so on up till 2 plus 2. So this would evaluate to 2 power I. You can probably check this later. So this simplifies to plus 2 power I plus 2 minus 1, you will have minus 1. So the recurrence relation, so this is the simplified one. So 2 power I m of n minus I plus 2 power I minus 1. So here now if we need to solve this, so the thing is that we need to go to the initial condition. So initial condition is m of 1 is equal to 1. So somehow we'll have to make this as m of 1. So if you have to make this as 1. So what we'll have to substitute, n is equal to, sorry, I is equal to n minus 1. Okay, so I'll just substitute that. Since, yeah, 2 power of I, right? So it is n minus 1, and m of n minus 1 plus 2 power of n minus 1, and you have a minus 1 at the end. So at the end what you have is 2 power n minus 1 into m of 1 is 1. So you can just write it 2 power n minus 1, and the other two terms 2 power n minus 1 minus 1. So now this becomes 2 into 2 power n minus 1 minus 1. So we have this 2 n power minus 1 plus 1 minus 1. So this you can write it as 2 power n minus 1. So here you can just see this algorithm would be of big O of 2 power n. So this is how you get the complexity of this algorithm. I hope this is clear.
Harsha, one question.
Yeah.
Is there any method to find out the base condition?
Yes. Yeah. 1 second. I'll just go back to this.
Sure.
Okay, I hope you can see the algorithm here. So to find the base condition, so either it's, is it visible?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, yeah. So either so in case of 1 second, so I had showed you another algorithm. So here you had a base condition, here it was very evident here, but in this one here we don't have it evident. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to see what is the base condition. So what is the minimum input that you can give. So input, the number of disks that you can give is 1, you cannot give 0. So substitute 1. So in case of 1, what you have is the number of moves would also be just 1, because you move just one disk from one tower to another tower. So that is how we'll have to find the initial condition. So initial condition should be the minimum of your input size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So using this, so this is how we get the complexity of this algorithm. So this algorithm would take a big O of 2 power n. I think with this I can stop. Probably the other problems we can take tomorrow.
Harsha, this problem can also be solved by the recursive tree method, right?
Yes, yeah. If you solve it using the recursive tree method, okay, I'll show that as well. 1 second. I hope you can see the canvas. Yeah. So in case of n disks, what you do is you'll have to compute n minus 1 and n minus 1. Okay. And then for n minus 1, you'll have to again compute. There is 2 times of you have that thing, right? So it is n minus 2 twice here. Again here as well, it is the same. So this would go on until the last one would be here you have 2, and then you just have 1 and 1. So if you see this tree, the size of this tree would be, the number of levels in this tree would be 2 power of n minus 1. This I think we could like probably take up in the next session as well. Yeah. So first method is the substitution method. Once
So
that is done,
the exam paper they will tell which method to adopt, is it? Or or how have you seen such
No,
papers?
I've not seen any paper as such. I think mostly they would ask you with a proper
What
method, saying
method?
that yeah, solve this recurrence relation using say substitution method, or solve this recurrence using the recursive tree method.
Okay.
So based on that, you could and yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I think with this we can probably stop here. Probably tomorrow we can
Harsha,
again.
one
Yeah.
question. For this data structure, you are following which book, T1 or a T2?
Uh, this I'm following both. There are they've mentioned which topics to study from which textbook, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm following the same.
Okay. You're going by the syllabus which they have given the topic from which book. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Harsha, do we have similar sessions for other subjects?
Uh, I'm not sure. That probably we'll have to
Yeah,
decide. Yeah, the others would matter.
yeah. Means there is a session. Whoever is interested to take session, the people can feel free to post there. So based on that, we will proceed further.
Thank you.
Yeah. Manju, are you there in call?
Yes, Parag.
Yeah. If you would share, no, some thoughts on what we are discussing yesterday.
Yes, yes.
The people who joined from section 4 and section
Mhm.
5,
Mhm.
that would help, Yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, Parag. So, team, we were discussing about completing our assignments and quizzes uh, before actually starting discussion on the class topics. It really helps that we go on class topics every day. I do believe that it's must required for writing our midterm and main exams. But as the need of ours says that we have to complete the assignments and the quizzes as soon as possible, so that we can take some pressure off and start studying for midterm. So there, unless until we do in a group, it is very difficult for us to complete on time. And BITS normally is very strict on the timelines on submitting the assignments and quizzes. So I was talking about working together to solve the assignments as well as quiz. Like if anybody has any idea on how to crack the quizzes, that would also help. So people can pour in their
Also, in
suggestions.
addition to,
Yes, Parag, go on.
sorry,
No, it's go on, please.
just on a friendly note, just I'm driving my vehicle and coming back from office to home now. So, yeah, that is much needed, whatever Manju just said now. Yeah, guys, over to you.
So people can tell their opinion, like how do they feel now. Like we are planning to complete assignment as soon as possible, maybe 15th or 16th of this month. Before that, if we can complete the assignments, give 1 or 2 days for quiz, then we can completely, if that is done, then completely we can concentrate on the midterm and we can carry on the regular stuff.
Yeah, Manju, but assignments are different for different people, right? Actually, the group, they may have a different group with different assignments. How
Yes.
we are going to plan for it?
Yes, Selvan, because I heard that there are for the SAT, there are like 28 assignments.
Okay.
28 assignments are circulated to different groups. If you take my assignment is construction of a tower, and I have to do that in the Python code. And then
Ourselves is actually employees attendance through binary search method.
Correct. Even though the problem statement number is different, but the problem statement remains same. So all I have to go every time when you but don't mention the problem statement, just mention the problem statement. So there are a lot of people who have got the same problem statement. And if people can go one by one and solve it, it will be better. So
So that is where we need a suggestion from people saying how do we do that.
Hey guys, I'm from section 3. This is the first time I'm joining. So, yeah, I believe the assignments are overlapping. So, I think me and Selvan have the same one. It's the employee tracker, Selvan, for you, is it?
Yeah, employee attendance through binary ADT.
Yeah, it's the same one. So yeah, they have overlap on the assignments, but I guess going through them one by one and discussing them maybe would be a bit tough. Yes, maybe to take some basic idea, it is possible.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just to add on current point, so if we make and everyone can mention their assignment. So as someone just said, 28 total of 28 assignments are there. So that can help, I think, if they prepare one some common Excel online. So if people can update, so by this way we can utilize this.
Yeah.
Yeah, Karan, just to, I agree with you, Karan. So there are a lot of people from different areas. There are some people who are from software industry. There are people from mechanical industries. Some people know. Some people are very, very well versed with the technology. They know how to code using Python and everything. There are some people who are very good at codes, and there are some people who are very good at DSAD. So the intention is to gather together and solve our assignments and quizzes as soon as possible. Maybe you're good at Python coding. Maybe someone is good at the MFDS. So its intention is to get the help from the people and solve as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely it's a novel idea actually. I totally vote for you.
Yeah, because very difficult unless until because we are not doing a regular course though. So even the part time also we are spending 8 hours in a classroom, and after that we have to do our regular stuff. Family is one side, the professional pressure is one side, and on top of it, this is one.
Totally agree with you.
So it's very difficult. I don't know. Last couple of days, I've been losing sleep. Ever since so much pressure is coming. So I was talking to my group members, and I was asking them that how are you guys actually catching up on the videos? I mean, I've not even watched all the videos. They are still pending. So I mean, these quizzes, assignments, everything is piled up. How are you guys managing with the jobs?
Karan, you have to go through the videos at least. Otherwise, you have to get the topics at least so that you can get through net and you can learn the topics for week by week. Then only you can be able to cope up with the schedule. Otherwise, it will pile up just like our stack, and it is very difficult to clear it up.
Yeah. So how do you guys do it? Like, do you guys go through one video a day, or do you attend all the videos on Saturday and that is enough? How do you guys manage
if
that?
possible, we will try to attend in Saturday or else at least one video in a day so that we can finish it off actually. Otherwise, get the topics actually. So you have the PPT and get the topics from the PPT and then try to read it from the net and other things and get the concept and try to do that.
Watching the video or watching the class doesn't add any value or knowledge to you. You have to go through YouTube videos, internet search and all this. What is taking the class is useless.
Yeah, I agree. But some of the points actually you can take it from the classes. That's why I told you that you can get the PPT, what topic they are covering, or from the hand notes, what topic for today, and try to get the actual content from the YouTube videos. There are very, very good videos available in YouTube, and with that help, you can get the concept and then try to solve the problem.
Selvan, I completely agree with you. The problem here that we have very less time. By this time next month, we'll be preparing ourselves for the midterm.
Correct, very correct.
So time is a constraint here. We don't have as Arsha was saying, we don't have a big off, and maybe we can compromise on beta and omega. So So time is not that much we have. We have only 1 month of time, and in that 30 days of time, we have to complete the assignments, quizzes, and we have to prepare for the midterm. And when you see the like people here teaching the subjects, we feel that maybe Harsha today, yesterday it was Santosh or somebody else. Those people are very good compared to our professor in some of the subjects. Right, Asha was saying,
Yeah,
explaining
thanks to
about.
Asha actually.
Yeah, so
We had done a good job today. And whoever is this concept actually, they collecting all the people at night and then we have a discussion. It's a very, very good idea. Thanks to Parag and even Manju, you also actually, so that you people are doing really a good job.
Thank you, everyone.
So yes, so the intention is to push all of us to a next semester with the good marks. So that's the intention. Because when I was talking to the previous batch people, they said they worked like this. They formed a group. They got the solution from different sources, either from a website, either through a different contact, and they worked as a group and they solved it, and they got a good mark also. So that is the intention, so that we can see our faces at least in the calls in the next time also. That's the intention.
See, then the people in this group can plan actually how to collect the 28 assignments, and then that group can combine together to solve the problems actually.
Actually, guys, we have to strategize properly, and also, apart from this, Manju, we missed Rahul yesterday. I can see Rahul here in the call from section 2.